Well, first off, welcome, friends. It is a gloriously warm and nearly spring-like, dare I say, day out there, I think. I haven't been outside, but I saw the temperature. I heard it's in the 70s, so that's nice. And hope you had a chance to peek outside or go outside to experience that. We're very excited to have you here, and we are the Deeper Learning team here at OVEC. We are going to be doing session 3. This is the second virtual session, but session 3 total of our series on simple shifts and navigating the waters of deeper learning. And today's session is going to be the simple shifts for durable skills, which we'll define and talk about a little bit as we continue here. As far as for housekeeping here, just notes that, yes, we're recording this session. If you haven't already, please change your Zoom name so that we know what district you are with. And if you go to the participants button on your Zoom chat little bar, then you're going to see a list of the participants, and then on your name you should be able to click that more button and go to rename, or you might even see the rename button without having to do the drop down. Either way, that's how you get your name, and you can temporarily change it to like what it showed as far as the district of the name. Honestly, if it's at the beginning or end, that's, as long as we can see it, that's good enough for us. So again, we really appreciate your time and to be with us today. This is our total team. We have multiple friends here. We have some information about our superpowers and our Twitter handles, and this will be repeated at the end as well. So we certainly love to hear from you and have any questions throughout the process of this lovely deeper learning adventure that we've been on this year. So do reach out. We have some community commitments. We had these on the last time, so just to review them very quickly. Be mindful of stepping up and stepping back. Feel free to speak up, empower yourself, unmute. Just be mindful of the space you're taking and sharing the space with others. Want to be a charitable listener, assuming that all will engage, having something to teach you that you'll learn from others. We're going to debating the ideas, not the people, and the different things that we'll be talking about today. We definitely want to be timely, especially on the ending part. And if it ends up leaving a few minutes early, then I'm sure no one will complain about that. We want to definitely connect and collaborate and have moments throughout that we're engaging you, that when we pose a question or throw something out there, please engage in the chat and on the camera and with the microphone and help us out to make this more of an engaging, connected space. And this one was unintentionally one of the most important ones from last time, but I think we're good. We're feeling good. I don't want to jinx it, but have grace with us as we do technology. It is definitely a multitasking adventure when you're recording and you're sharing your screen, but you're clicking and you're doing the thing. So anyway, for all those things to come, please have grace with us as we move through and facilitate this presentation. All right. So with that, I think I am passing the baton to Rachel.
Yeah.
Rachel, do you want me to stop the screen so you can click? So
that would be lovely.
That's exactly what's about to happen. Hold on.
We have all the A and B districts in the house. Anchorage, Allen, Boone, Bullitt. Anybody else I'm missing? I think those are our ones right now, right? Yeah. So I'm going to quickly, well, first of all, I'm going to share my screen if I can get that going like I'd like. Here we go. You guys see that okay? Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. I see Chastity nodding at me. Thank you, Chastity. So a quick replay. So this is a series, as Adam talked about. But it's okay if you're jumping in with us right now and this is the first one. That's totally fine. But just a recap of kind of where we have been through our series so far. So day 1, back in December, if you can remember that, if you were there for us, we started out by kind of immersing you in the student's perspective and that lesson with McKenna. And you got to feel kind of what deeper learning can feel like from the student's perspective. We also allowed you to develop your own definition and understanding of what deeper learning is with that card sort activity where we saw lessons that we might consider dull all the way to vibrant, and using those cards we kind of came to our definition. And then we ended that day with revealing, okay, why did the day feel different? What was different about it? What did we like about it? And we noticed there were some shifts in the way that the instruction in McKenna and in the card sort, shifts in the way that those things were designed that were creating more deeper learning experiences. In our first virtual session, we really looked at how do we make a task more authentic, more relevant, more meaningful to students. So we zoomed in on a McKenna task and really looked at like, what are the layers here? What's going on here to make this task more engaging and really more of what we want? We kind of landed on this idea of moving from traditional to transformational, but there's that kind of sweet spot in the middle where we can add some shifts in that transitional period, right? And then again, we finished with some simple shifts. So again, today, we promise you'll get some more simple shifts, but we just kind of want to know in your journey with us so far, what have you tried? How has it gone? What are you still curious about? I'm going to give you guys, let's say maybe about a minute in the chat to just kind of think through those questions. What have you tried since we've been kind of on this journey together? What's going well? What would you still like to know? And when I say go, we'll just all hit enter. So you've got about a minute starting now to just kind of reflect on your learning so far with us. All right. And when I say waterfall, we'll enter. So ready, waterfall. What do you got? What have you tried? How's it gone? Lacey, can you help me with the chat? I'm not able to see it for some reason.
I can, absolutely. Intentional time for reflecting on their learning, and it's going well so far. Aubrey, that's awesome to hear. Melissa from Anchorage is struggling over the challenge of, making the things that she's learning here fit into the programs that they teach within Anchorage. Krista in Boone says instructional coaches will be receiving the vibrant learning experiences to begin to expand the work. Woo woo. Mm-hmm. We have Stacy from Boone that's participating in a science leadership assessment PD series, and the science teacher in their district has also used the McKenna unit. And so she's set to share how that went with the district science teacher leaders, which is awesome.
That McKenna, she's our favorite student, right? We talked about.
I know. I love McKenna.
All right. So, oh, go ahead.
I got a couple more for you. Hold on.
Okay, perfect.
I've been utilizing the language simple shifts a lot when working with teachers or teacher teams. I've also mentioned the McKenna experience to a couple science teachers. That's Jennifer and Bullet. And Chastity from Allen has provided ideas for simple classroom shifts to her teachers on the Deeper Learning team, and they're currently implementing some of those shifts. Woo, woo, woo.
We love to hear that. Today, like we promised, we're going to keep getting some more simple shifts. But in this trajectory so far, again, we've kind of come to an understanding or hopefully experience like what it feels like or can feel like from a learner's perspective. We've thought about how to shift our tasks. But before we really zoom in on some more simple shifts today, we kind of want to zoom out for just a second and go back to our why. We like to revisit that why every now and then, keeps us motivated. And why are these shifts necessary? Like, why isn't the way we've traditionally approached teaching and learning, why isn't that enough? And to do that, I'd like to challenge each of you to just go through your pictures on your phone or maybe look around your desk right now. And I'd love for you to find a picture of a kid you care deeply about. Here's mine, if you can see. This is Liam. He's obsessed with sharks. He's my 3-year-old. He's going to be my focus. So take just a second, find a picture, a kid you care deeply about. Have that in front of you. Okay. And what I'm going to ask you to do, once you have that picture in front of you, those smiling faces, or maybe not smiling, depending. Sometimes mine's not smiling, but he's still my kiddo. I want you to think about, we're going to do a Mentimeter. So you can either scan with a QR code, like with your phone, or there's a menti.com and there's a code there. I want you to try to capture, I think you've got like 250 characters. So if you had to lay it out, what do you want for this child in their K-12 education? When you send them away to school each day, what are you hoping? What is your hopes and dreams for them? Take just a couple minutes and fill those out. I'm going to give it 2 minutes on the clock here. Share, what would you hope for that kid you care so much about? There was our gentle countdown there. Always love the ones that have an explosion and just really like take you aback all of a sudden. So let's see, what were some of the things that you all mentioned here? You present this. And if you still got some answers rolling in, that's great. A most rounded education possible, teachers who are willing to try, be a critical thinker, critical consumer of information, communicate with others respectfully, be able to work with others. Ooh, choice beyond worksheet completion, opportunity to demonstrate their learning in a manner that fits their unique personality, be able to collaborate and problem solve, feel empowered and excited. Yes, excited. I want this child to know how to work for success. So work for it. I want him to know it's okay to struggle, learn, and grow. I want him to be able to see his strengths and be able to push himself further. Find confidence to pursue his dreams. Takes the time to understand that they may have to repeat things several times. It's okay to find a different way to teach him. He must be, he doesn't have to be, just because he is well behaved doesn't mean he doesn't need additional support. So all of the things you guys are capturing here, right, really get at something we're super passionate about. Yes, we know that schools must teach our students academic content, right? We need our students to know academic content and be content masters. But aside from that, we want so much more and so many more things for them. And we know for a while that just the academic content piece hasn't been enough, right? Employers say to us all the time, right, that like our kids are coming to us and they're not able to communicate, they're not able to collaborate, all the things that you all just said. And that's where enters the conversation of a graduate profile or a portrait of a learner or whatever your local context might be. What I have here is the newly developed Kentucky portrait of a learner. So if you've not seen this one, this is the newly adopted Kentucky one that Kentucky has adopted that they want for their students. It captures a lot of the same terms that you guys mentioned and what you wanted for your own student. The point here is no matter what we're calling them, a graduate profile, a portrait of a learner, a diploma, whatever, it is that promise we're making to our students, and it's that ticket for their future. And we know that you guys are coming to us from a variety of different districts, some that have an implemented portrait of a learner, some that are brand new to this or coming to this. And I wanted to take just a second for you guys to kind of just self-assess, like, where is your district in this process right now? In the chat, in just a second, I will drop the Jamboard link. Lacey, or Adam, I'm having trouble getting over to the chat for some reason in my view. If you guys could drop that, that would be awesome.
Yep, I got it, my friend. It is also in the participant folder.
Okay.
That is true. And by the way, the participant folder, I was going to say, Lacey dropped the participant folder link earlier in the chat.
Uh-oh. We lost Adam.
Disappeared.
He disappeared.
So okay, I dropped in the chat a link to the Jamboard.
Perfect. And I see that we have all kind of anonymous animals joining us now in the Jamboard. I always love when that starts happening. I'll give you guys just a second to get here. And what I want you to do is, this is a brand new tool that UK Next Gen just put out. It's their idea of like a portrait of a learner. So that graduate profile, that promise we make to our kids, kind of like as we're implementing that, kind of like the continuum from like, we have a portrait developed all the way up to it's fully functioning, it's changing the student experience. We have assessments aligned to that. We have instructional strategies ready to go. And we just kind of want you to read these descriptors and kind of think about, where am I, my district, at in this journey? As you kind of read the descriptors, just add a sticky note with your initials and your district and just kind of push that along to where you think your district might be. Now, if you're in a district or a position that, you might say, we're not there yet, we don't have it. It's okay. You can put it in this space over to the left. So just kind of self-identify by dragging your sticky note, like, to where you guys think you are in this journey. And there's not a right or wrong answer here yet, or ever. So Bullitt County, someone just said we have our published profile. We're starting to have cohorts of teachers thinking about being trained on those specific competencies that their graduate profile encompasses. So starting to work on that instructional design. Perfect. I'll give, I see a penguin trying to add something right now, so I'll give just a second for that.
It's hard to type with flippers when you're a penguin.
You know, we should give the penguin a little longer.
That's right. It's only fair. It's equitable, really.
Yeah, I do also see an anonymous dinosaur on here, so they might need, if it's T-Rex, like especially long time to
small arms. Small arms.
Yeah.
These are really bad dad jokes, y'all.
What can I say? Well, as you guys are kind of finishing up, kind of placing where you think you might be, we want to talk a little bit about these competencies or these skills. Excuse me. So on Kentucky's, you can see we have 6 competencies. And gosh, the little kid that I showed you guys a picture of gave me a nice little cough too. They give you lots of nice things. But I'd like for you to kind of reflect on these competencies. We sometimes throw them out and we say things like collaborator or contributor without really thinking about how does that connect or what does that mean for me? So I want you to take just a second and read through these competencies and kind of think about which one, how is that connecting with me? Like which one might be a personal strength for me? And if you go back to your Jamboard on the next screen, if you'll just make a sticky note and drag it to the competency you think might be a strength for you.
Rachel, will you model how to go get, how to do a sticky note? We have some folks that are new to Jamboard, and so they are needing a little direction.
Yes, ma'am. So if you see my screen right now, sorry, I'm like I'm coughing too. If you
want
just
me to narrate you while you do it,
maybe. I'm sure it's just unpleasant to hear me coughing in people's ears. I'm hovering over it right now. You'll add a sticky note. You can pick a color if you so desire, and just write your name. Hit save. And then you can resize it if you want it to not be so large. Oh, Aubrey, sorry, I'm moving yours. And then you would just kind of position it where you think it should go. So for me, I think I would put mine somewhere in here. I'm very reflective. I like to continue thinking and learning. So just kind of drag yours to where you think your personal strength might be. I have a drink, but it's not working. Adam brought me water. He's coming to the rescue, but it's not working. Okay, so as you're kind of placing your sticky notes there, if you guys wouldn't mind to drop in the chat, like, why was that? Or you can turn your microphone on. Why did you say that was a strength for you? Like, what are some things that you have to do or you see yourself doing daily that make it a strength? If we could get a couple people to just jump in the chat and share a little bit about that strength, or turn your microphone on.
I'm a super slow typist, so I will jump in with my voice.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate you.
So my role is an instructional coach in our district. And while I think there's a little piece of each of those that I shift in and out of in my role, I do think that it's wildly important for me to be a productive collaborator, both in my school building with my teachers and out of my building with my fellow amazing coaches and our fearless leaders at LSS. So that's an area that I think is special and dear to my heart. I always try to be a productive collaborator in that role.
Stacy, thank you so much for sharing. And I loved at the beginning of that how you said, it's kind of hard for me to tease these apart. Like a lot of them kind of intertwine in my role. I think that's beautiful. And we'll keep hitting on that today, that some of these do go so close in hand. It's hard to kind of tear them apart. All right. So now I'd like you to move your sticky note, and I want you to think now about what would your area of growth be? Like, what's the one you'd like to get better at? So just move your sticky note around on the wheel to say, where would I like to get better? This is fun to watch them move.
I was going to say the same thing. These Post-its are there's squirrels all over. That's great.
Yeah. Anybody want to share why this might be a growth area for them? And I love how Stacy connected it to her role. Anybody want to maybe share a little bit about their role and why the specific one they've chosen would be an area of growth?
I'll go ahead. Boone will be brave this today.
We appreciate you, Boone.
So I originally, for my strength, put critical thinker as the director of assessment. I have to really dig in and think critically about all things data and what that really means. But I think a area of always continuous growth is being an effective communicator. My personality, and Stacy can attest to this, my mind oversimplifies, I think, to a fault, that I don't think I always fully share all the components of it, because in my brain, that's how I process. I oversimplify and then I can attend to the task. But sometimes in communicating, I think that's an area I need to grow in, which goes back to the critical thinker, because I overanalyze. So I try to pick out key pieces, and sometimes that's not always the best.
Krista, I think our brains work similarly. As you were explaining that, I was like, yeah, I'll do that too. Lovely. If anyone else would share, I'll leave the floor open for just a moment.
We do have a share in the chat.
I was gonna say, can I read the things in the chat?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The chat is not visible for me.
That's when you share screen, you can't. It's okay. Don't feel bad.
So Jen from the OVEC Carissa team says engaged citizen, because she wants to do all the things, right? But it's hard. And Stacy says that Krista, who just shared, right, she's just too brilliant for the rest of us to keep up with. So sounds like that's likely a true statement.
So through this activity of kind of looking through those competencies and kind of personally relating them to ourselves and our careers, we see how important these skills are. I mean, you guys already said they were important for that child you love, and now you see they're also important for you. We've kind of said like the graduate profile or the portrait of a learner is like our attempt to capitalize on, yes, we have to do academic content. Yes, we're schools. That's part of that. That is what we're in the business to do, but we also have to do more, right? And we're going to push on this continuum a little bit. And whether you said, we're not even, we don't have one yet, it's not adopted yet, we think regardless of where you are on this continuum, you can start pushing on that vibrant learning experience and what student instruction feels like today. There are kids in seats today that need these skills and these dispositions, right, to be successful in the world. And we know that's what we want for our kids. So through today's session, that's what we're going to try to empower you with, is what are some simple shifts we can make to our instruction as soon as tomorrow to start making sure we're intentionally, explicitly teaching kids these durable skills. And that graduate profile has 6 to try to kind of try to zoom in and make this a manageable thing, because 6 is a lot to kind of deal with. We're going to zoom in on 3, the 3 that we think come up the most often and that almost all graduate profiles have. We're going to look specifically today at effective communicator. Oh, we might just pull up the whole grad profile there. We're going to look at effective communicator. We're going to look at productive collaborator and empowered learner. So a lot of you said, hey, we actually have a grad profile already. I want you to take just a second and think, like, what would the equivalent of those skills be on your own graduate profile? So I've highlighted the ones we're going to zoom in on today. If you want to take just a second to reflect on your own grad profile and think about like, what's the equivalent here? And if you don't have your own grad profile, just read those descriptions. Lacey's going to bring us back to our favorite student, McKenna, in just a second. And we're going to look at some of the McKenna lessons through these lenses. So take just, 30 seconds or so, read the descriptors, think about what the equivalent might be on your own profile of a graduate or profile of a learner. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lacey. Thank you guys for bearing with me through my coughing fit. I appreciate you all.
Okay. Here we go. Share. All right. Tell me if everyone can see my screen or give me a thumbs up. Oh,
you're good.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. So I want, as you can remember, Rachel kind of walked us through what the story so far of this series of professional learning has been, right? So the very first day we were all together. So I'm going to kind of do a flashback for those of you that might not have been here. The very first day we were all together, we engaged in an immersive learning experience. And we had this girl named McKenna. And as you can see in the picture on the screen, she looks a little different right now. Something's going on inside her. She is sick as a dog. And so we did an immersive learning experience where we put our student hats on and we experienced an anchoring phenomenon routine lesson. And after we experienced that lesson, we pulled out 10 different simple shifts that weren't science specific that you could use in any subject area that would get you to that squishy middle of deeper learning. And so today, what we are going to do is we're going to look at that actual lesson. And so Rachel said we're going to zoom in on these 3 durable skills: communication, collaboration, and empowered learner. And what we're going to do is I'm going to escape out of this. I'm going to give you within your participant folder, and I'll also drop it in the chat, you're going to have a copy of the actual slide deck that I used when you engaged in that learning experience. And so it's essentially a teacher's guide. It's a lesson, right? And so you're going to have everything that I did as kind of a reminder to what that experience was.
And the slide deck's dropped in the chat, so we got that covered.
Oh, thank you, Adam. Much appreciated. Now, unlike when we were there together, I have then dropped in examples of student work, right? So if teacher's guide asked you to do a thing like make an initial model, I dropped in an example of student work. And so what we're going to ask you to do is to analyze that lesson for where were students invited to engage in one of those durable skills. And then how might you add to or adapt that opportunity to be more explicit on that durable skill? So I'm also going to drop in the chat, paste, enter. I'm also going to drop in the chat a graphic organizer that we're going to use to kind of help with this discussion. So I'm going to flip over to that graphic organizer. And so you'll see you have a drop down to click which durable skill are we thinking about. It's going to ask you to do a forced copy, by the way. Is it effective communicator, productive collaborator, empowered learner? Where in that lesson, where in the slides did you see kids engaging in communication? And then how might you make that durable skill more explicit? So I've done an example up here, right? So in the McKenna slide deck on slides 6 and 7, students are engaging in some scientific communication. They're creating this initial model, right? And models are a way that scientists communicate. They're using pictures, words, and symbols, and the teacher's circulating the room, asking some probing questions. That is a form of communication. However, I was not explicit at all that that was a form of communication. Nowhere in that immersion lesson experience, nowhere in my lesson plans did we talk about communicating like scientists. So my little adaptation was, so if models are a specific way that scientists communicate, if we were to make that explicit to students using some type of anchor document or a discussion, they would be able to connect how revising their model is improving on communication. It's an actual discipline-specific way that scientists communicate. That's a way that I could make a durable skill more explicit to kiddos, right? Here's an example of what that anchor poster might look like, right? So scientists are effective communicators when they develop and use models to explain a phenomenon, or they construct explanations. This is an example of an anchor poster that might help make a durable skill more explicit.
Lacey, some people are saying that
Yes.
they're trying some of these docs, like the copy two, maybe, and they're needing
Yeah.
permission. It's not.
I just updated the permission on it.
Look
Thank
at
you,
you. Thank you.
Rachel. You're the best. You're the best. So I'm going to go back to the slideshow. So your task is going to be in a breakout room, and you're going to be in a breakout room with your district. So that'll make that ease of conversation a little easier. If you are not, if you are a solo, we will fix your solo and we will find you some friends. But you're going to make a copy of that analysis graphic organizer. And then using that McKenna slide deck, look for opportunities where students were invited to engage in one of those durable skills. Where might they have been asked to engage in some communication? Where might they have been asked to engage in some collaboration? Where might they have been asked to engage in our third one, which is what, Adam? I'm having a brain fart. Empowered learner.
I was to say, I'm in the middle of breakout room creation. I'm sorry. I was distracted.
No, you are fine. And so was the skill explicitly taught? Did I make it transparent to the students that, all right, we are about to collaborate, and here's a strategy for how we can be better collaborators? Did I not? How might you adapt it or tweak it to make it more explicit? Or maybe there are places in there where I was explicit and you don't need to shift it at all. So we're looking for you to find just a couple examples and have conversation around intentionality, right? We all, those of you that attended the PD, loved McKenna. You had a great time. It was an incredibly transformational experience. However, there's always opportunities to get better and be more explicit with kiddos about how we're working on those durable skills. So Adam is going to put us in a breakout room, and we're going to give you about 10 minutes in that breakout room to have some conversations around that slide deck and populate that graphic organizer. And I gave you way more rows in the graphic organizer than you need. So use as many as you see fit as you kind of come to. Adam, what additional information might they need regarding breakout rooms?
I am maybe about 17 seconds away from opening them.
17 is a very specific number.
It is okay, so specific. I'm a specific guy.
Adam is 17 now, probably 15 seconds away from plopping you in a breakout room. So analysis graphic organizer, McKenna slide deck. Where were there opportunities for students to engage in those durable skills?
All right.
How might you make that more explicit?
Lisa, we're all back.
Oh, yay. Awesome. Welcome home, everybody. We missed you. So I hope that was some fruitful conversation. And so here's what we would like to do is share some of that. The first thing is, if you could kind of nose goes one individual to share your document with me, just so that I can merge them all together, and then I'll drop it in the participant folder so that you have access to everybody's thinking, because we are much better together than we are separate. And then you can also nose goes through like your texting or something, who is going to be your spokesperson for the group to just choose one opportunity / shift that you guys came up with, and or enlighten us on a conversation that you had. So I'm going to give everybody like 30 seconds to kind of collect your thoughts and nose goes it and figure out who might A, be your spokesperson, and B, be your sharer to email me your document.
Lacey, I cut out when they were when you were sharing the document, and then this was her first day at all with the deeper learning. So we don't really have a document, but I just was explaining what McKenna was, and so we more were okay. So sorry.
Do not worry about it at all, Melissa. It looks like you're home safe. Looks like you went and picked up the kids and all is well. So no worries. Don't worry about it. It's okay. So then I'm going to pick on Boone because Boone was the first to jump out of their room. So Boone, can you nose go as a spokesperson and kind of share with us what your conversation was around?
I believe Stacy is going to be the person because I think she's the one that was our recorder. Stacy.
Hey guys. So one of the things that we talked about a lot, and I know we mentioned this earlier about how some of these bleed together, but often when we were exploring through the sides, it was hard for us to decide between communicator and collaborator because we feel like a lot of those skills overlap one another. And it was easy to look at an activity that students were doing and say, well, when you look at the nuances of a collaborator and you look at the nuances of a communicator, it seemed like they were pulling from both of those often. It felt much easier to say, ooh, that's empowered learner. Like for us on slide 4, when it talked about having them select a norm that they felt weak in or an area to grow, like that screamed empowered learner, that they had to be self-reflective, understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then be able to set a plan. And then I love that they had to carry on to the next level and share it with a partner. So that little bit of accountability was there as well. But like on slide 11, you know, we lean towards that being more collaborator, and on slide 2, that being more communicator. But someone could change my mind.
Your conversation is so spot on so we are on like version 3 of this kind of of this experience tonight, because we kept having that exact same tug and pull of teasing those two apart and how interdependent they really are among each other. And so I wonder, like, how might we make that interdependence explicit to kiddos, right? Like, oh my gosh, collaboration and communication are so intertwined, and here's how one helps another, or one can be to the other's detriment, right?
Exactly.
Awesome.
I will say, Lacey, one thing we talked about, that those pieces all met together, but one determining factor for collaborator is that within the group, you had to come to some sort of consensus. We talked about with our students, whatever, we may be communicating, but we're not always collaborating when we have to agree upon something. So I personally thought that was kind of something that could delineate if it was collaborator or communicator.
That's a good nuance. And it's the whole like square and rectangle, right? Like all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles, right? Yes, that's yes. So like it's not always the case, but that's a really great kind of nuance that makes a difference. Anything else from Boone? Okay, I think that leaves Bullet, right, as our other kind of large group. And so I don't know if you guys paper, rock, scissored it, have a separate text group going on, but who would like to be your kind of share outer?
I think the lady that was taking notes left. She had to jump off and go to a class. So we're, I guess we're going to do something extemporaneously.
Okay, I love it. You can wing it. Just talk to us about what you guys talked about then.
Well, we talked about the different ways of engage or bringing out kids' communication styles, and not just everything written, but doing like visuals of what they were doing, and trying to help each other spark ideas and jump in here.
So did you guys see that evident at any place in kind of the anchor text, the anchor McKenna lesson?
Yeah, I got to go back and pull it up to tell you. I love the driving board where they put the questions and the different colored Post-it notes. They organized them. I thought that was a really, really, really good tool to use.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you're going to see some maybe simple shifts that might, as Adam, kind of as I pass the torch to Adam, to maybe help with that driving question board. So that's a great lead in to that possible strategy that we're going to talk about.
There's another lady on there. She needs to help me.
Okay. Sorry, I was going to say, we said that on slide 10, the paper that's labeled Communicating in Scientific Ways would help students be effective communicators, especially in that setting where they might not know the vocabulary or quite understand it, or how to explain their thought process in a scientific way. So I thought that was really nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wonder if there are ways when we use that kind of CSW, Communicating in Scientific Ways scaffold, to make it transparent to kiddos that these are used to make you better communicators, right? Like I think that's the nudge we're trying to do. Like we have these great scaffolds, and McKenna is a great example of all of these durable skills kind of living and breathing, but they're all very implicitly living and breathing, right? I was not explicit, like, okay, so one way to become a better communicator is sometimes like you need some scaffolds, some help. And these are ways that we could respectfully agree and disagree with our classmates. That's a scaffold, that's a help. That's a way to become a better communicator. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think we are starting to try to think about how can we move from the implicit use of those durable skills to the explicit use of those durable skills.
Well, another thing we were talking about was the fact that there's so many visuals, and a lot of time the visuals will help kids or adults either who might not be able to get what the terminology is or whatever it is you're talking about. Especially we deal with a lot of littles, and our littles are struggling to read, and most of them are below grade level. So if you have those visuals, it's easier for them to understand what you're talking about, because they might not understand the word, but if they see the picture, then it's going to click. And that's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can even build on that and say that visuals are a form of communication. It is a way that we communicate. And so if we can be explicit about that to kiddos and say, right, so we're looking at these models, right? Models are a visual form of communication, or we're looking at this image. And you could even have a conversation on how is this easier for you to understand than if I were to just put words up here, right? Because even like that is a teachable moment in regards to communication as a skill. So with that kind of intentionality lens, I'm going to pass the torch to Adam to kind of hammer home the need for intentionality, and then talk to us about some shifts, some additional tools to put in your toolbox around simple shifts for deeper learning.
All right, I should be sharing the screen. I'm going to go to that full mode. And yes, I'll be happy to talk to you about intentionality. There's going to be some three specific shifts that we're going to discuss in just a second, but we look at the idea of being intentional as kind of like a huge overarching, if you will, kind of shift. So I want to talk briefly about how that looks and feels as far as talking about the durable skills. The first is just being focused. When you're doing a lesson, especially, you probably want to focus or highlight on one, maybe two, that you want to be very mindful of in the creation, but also in the execution of that lesson. We can get really quickly in the weeds, as we've been talking about the idea of how many of these overlap, and that you could easily hit 2, 3, 5 of them, but be mindful of the focus there. The second is just being explicit, as I said, in the planning. And so this is a question that comes up a lot in different contexts for us, and we share a lot when we talk to our friends in districts and classrooms. It's the idea of, as you're making that lesson, or maybe even an entire unit, is where might students have opportunities to practice or create evidences for those durable skills? So again, it's that intentionality, right? Like, here's a great moment to ... have a moment where we can practice our effective communication or create evidence for such a thing, for example. Next, it's being meta during a lesson. And I mentioned the at descriptor level. So let me explain what I mean by that. First off, as you especially are at the beginning of familiarizing people and getting them to really think about your portrait of a learner, your profile of a graduate, or certain durable skills, you want to call attention in the middle of the teaching that this is a moment this is a moment where I am really working on being an effective communicator. The key, however, is that you don't stop at what I call above the line, right? Like just saying, I'm an effective communicator right now. Well, that's a little bit of a flag, but it's looking at whatever your portrait of a learner, profile or graduate, whatever durable skills, it's that criteria below the line that's really important. So if I was being a productive collaborator and saying, hey, we're working together for a common goal right now, or this is something you need to be thinking of as you ... Calling that out and doing it during a lesson, using that language, creating that nomenclature in your classroom is really key. And last but not least, being reflective on the growth of that durable skill, which can happen during and or after, but moments where a student has a chance to say, how did I get better at this particular skill and this particular criterion of a skill? We can say the bucket of, empowered learner, for example. But if we look at that bucket, it's really going to be helpful to suggest in a sentence stem, bullets on a post, whatever way, to think down to the aspects of what makes a empowered learner, so they can be very specific when they're being reflective on that skill growth. So again, we're going to have 3 shifts that we're going to put in front of you here in just a second. We just want to remind ourselves and come back that flashback of the driving questions. What simple shifts can I make to empower all students with durable skills? We're thinking about the criteria of the portrait of a learner that's demonstrated here, and in particular, the empowered learner, effective communicator, and productive collaborator as a piece that we're highlighting, but thinking of the words, right? So with that in mind, I want to share a little Oliver Wendell Holmes quote, of all things, you might say, but it's a great little story about what he calls the 3-story intellect. And so I'm going to give you a minute to just read what's on the screen, and then we'll talk. And by the way, I tried to take away the sexism of the original language, as you can see. So take a few moments just to read through the quote. All right, so with the 1-story, the 2-story, and the 3-story, and the graphic that's on the left here, talk to me for a minute about questions. Tell me in the chat, which I will have to have friends help read, or just unmute and say out loud, what would you think a 1-story intellect, what kind of question would they ask based on the way that Mr. Holmes there defines it?
I think explicit questions that are found right in the text.
There you go. Exactly. Excellent. Thank you, Tina. So very fact-based, probably one correct answer. Yeah. What about the 2-story? Go ahead. Sorry.
Black and white, level 1, who, what, when, where questions.
And what about 2-story questions? What's a 2-story intellect question maybe would feel like? And you can either actually give an example of a question or talk me through it. Go ahead.
I think analyzing across text.
Gotcha. So you might be looking at 2 different things, searching for an answer. Now you see like maybe the doors open a little bit to ask a range of questions that could have maybe a range of answers if you defended them. Okay.
Why did that happen?
Go ahead.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Very good. All right. And last, what's a 3-story question feel like? what might be other words for three-story questions that maybe from your own teaching, instruction, whatever, that you might feel like falls in this kind of bucket?
Universal questions like about society and people outside of the text.
I think, again, excellent. And, you know, it's definitely the idea of, yeah, if you had a universal question like, is war ever justified? That's a huge question. I mean, that could drive an entire course, much less a text of a book or across a unit or whatever. So yes, okay. So we got these ideas of the three-story intellect, the 1, 2, 3 of it. Next, I would love for you to look at these two graphics. Now, these are for real graphics that were in a for real classroom in Jefferson County. We're going to give a shout out to Brian Quillen, who was kind enough to let us visit him. And he had on the right, he had a poster on his wall. And the thing that you're seeing on the left is a handful of laminated bookmarks that he had for his students. So ask me some questions. What are some things that this is driving you curiosity-wise? If Brian was here and you could ask him some questions, what kind of things about the poster on the right and the laminated bookmark on the left, what kind of things is that generating for you? You can drop them in the chat or unmute. Stacy and Boone says expectations. Okay, so you have kind of an understanding of these are the kinds of expectations of conversations, maybe the depth of conversations I'm going to have in my classroom. What else? A good way to encourage deeper questions, says Catherine. Thank you for sharing. All right. So yes, you definitely feel that not only is this a place or a classroom where we want those deeper questions and things to be addressed, but you're feeling like there's also some structures about that too. How might we, and in what ways might we engage and have those higher discourse kind of conversations? So that leads us to our first shift, which is something called levels of questioning. And that, just like we have the three-story intellect, it's really following that same idea of a level 1, level 2, and level 3 question. We have the same house on the right, kind of that idea of what 3 levels would sound like, what kind of words we might hear, and those kind of thoughts and questions that fit the 3 levels. On the left, we have just kind of a breakdown of the level 1, 2, and 3. Just a couple of key things to point out here, that the level 1 is beyond a yes, no, or true, false. That in the construction of these levels of questioning would even count as a level 1 question. So it is fact-based. It's probably a short answer. There's probably one correct answer, but it's beyond just saying yes, no, true, false. We got those medium length questions in the middle. That is the first point where you're really probably going to say, where in the book did you see that, or where in the text, or where in the argument, or what's your evidence, right? And lastly, those level 3 questions can get very big, can drive whole projects or units or even courses. One well-placed and well-done level 3 question could generate the course and the discussion of a class for an hour. So all of those things, as far as labeling, is a label 1, 2, and 3. And there is a handout. If someone can maybe drop that in the chat, that would be great. That takes that down. It's kind of a takeaway as far as the handout of explaining those level 1, 2, 3 questions. This is something that I've used in classrooms. It's something that the only aspect I really want to point out really quick right now is just the fact that it develops a nomenclature. It develops a language, and it can help in the sense of strategically constructing better questions, deeper questions. Because as people understand, and as the students of a classroom understand what a level 1, 2, and 3 question is, it can be a great shorthand to drive discussion, nudge for better. For example, oh, that's a lot. We're getting a lot of level 1 questions. Let's hear some level 2 and level 3 questions. Or that was a great level 2 question. Tell me more about the evidence. But we're using that language, once that naming and labeling is aware, is a way of analytically thinking about the level of questions that are being posed, right? So the thing that we want to make sure to make clear, though, is that there's a question of generation and a question of usage. So The first question being, who is creating the questions? Obviously, and clearly, if you're introducing the strategy, it will probably start with the teacher. And they'll be, again, very meta and very explicit about, I'm going to ask a level 2 question, and they do, and all those kind of things. But the goal here, especially for attacking the competencies of a portrait of a learner or profile of a graduate, is that the thinking and that learning, in order to demonstrate those competencies, those durable skills, has to be to the students themselves, right? So that eventually the students are creating the questions, and that's half the battle. So not only are they creating questions, and they're getting better at creating higher level thinking, deeper kind of questions, but it's also in the using and answering of them. So if this is a strategy that's going to attack our durable skill, it's a strategy that's going to be, I pose these deeper questions and becomes a way of the student answering and creating that discourse. So just be aware of that. Obviously, it starts maybe with a teacher modeling, or it starts with random questions and you going through the construction of how is that level 1, 2, 3. But again, it's the students that we want to make sure are using and answering. So that leads us to our next shift, which is something called uptaking, which we're actually going to practice here in a minute. And it is a construction. It's a little bit of a top moves strategy. It's an idea of making sure that we are doing things very deliberately that some students struggle with to do without some kind of scaffolding or structure with it. And what sounds, and again, from doing this in a classroom, at first, when you're trying to do it so deliberately and you're practicing this skill, it sounds a little forced. It sounds a little bit like, man, but there's even a little giggling. I know when I've done this with students, but then it's funny. You start practicing this and you start practicing this strategy of uptaking, and then it just becomes a natural part of the discourse. And the payoff being, of course, how that's improving that discourse and the things you're trying to achieve when students are talking, not just peer to teacher, but peer to peer. So you can see the big bullets here is uptaking involves using the person's name, because it was always about students talking to me and then talking to students. Then the next student would talk to me, right? Instead of talking to each other. Hey, John asked that question. Ask John. Okay, well, John, right? Repeating words and phrases for that active listening part, right? So the idea of, so what I heard you say is, and kind of sounds for us that have some instructional coaching backgrounds, coachy, but it's true. It's showing that I actually listen to what you say as I respond. And last but not least, you kind of have a move here that as you uptake the conversation, you continue the conversation, it's like passing a baton. The idea that you're either amplifying what the last person said or a person that said in the conversation, agreeing with additional evidence, or you're respectfully disagreeing. But again, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm disagreeing with what you said, and here's why, as far as with evidence. So with that in mind, we're going to practice what would probably be considered a level 2 question, okay? Because it's not just one correct answer, and you're going to have to bring a little evidence to the plate. So I'd like to ask our group, which of these are better, but you got to give me a little why, because it's waffles or pancakes, right? And I want you to really think about one or more of these as far as strategies. Pay attention to the person that said something and you're saying their name, repeating words, and so on. And we can do this in a combination of ways. We do a little bit of chat, we can do a little bit of unmuting, but I'd like for someone to start that conversation. Who wants to give us a stance on waffles and pancakes and a reason why?
I'll start.
Please go ahead. Thank you, Krista, for jumping in there.
All right. I think that waffles are better than pancakes because they have little holes that hold extra butter and syrup.
The containers of the waffles. I love it. Let's uptake from that conversation. Who wants to continue with Krista's thoughts there?
I'll go.
Okay, thank you, Melissa.
So I agree with Krista that waffles are better than pancakes. I also enjoy the little holes for butter. And I also like that it can have a little crunch on the outside with soft in the middle.
Thank you, Melissa. Love the amplification there, and I loved how you used Krista's name. One more turn.
I'll jump in. Krista and who else? Melissa?
Melissa?
I do agree with you on the ability to hold the butter and the syrup, but I really like pancakes. I want to disagree with you a little because they're just soft. I don't have to deal with the crunch.
In your opinion, the criterion is softness
That's right.
is more delightful for your breakfast. Got you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank
So
you.
Lena, I would like to add on to that in the waffles, it drives me nuts to like get the butter and the syrup and all the little squares just right. I just want to eat it. That's a lot of work.
It's delayed gratification. Absolutely. Rachel, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, though. That is the extra labor. Is it the payoff or not? That's a good point. All right. Well, thank you for experiencing that and doing that. And again, I'm just telling you from experience that it's interesting that when you create these moves and these strategies and structure, and that what you see on the right is a clickable, leads you to a PDF. I actually had this as a poster in my room. Sometimes would point to it as we went through a discussion and in some discourse. That improved in quality and in quantity, even a little bit, the idea of how discussions and conversations happen in my classroom. So, and what became artificial, a little forced and scaffolded, started becoming just the way that we talked. All right. So I'm moving on. Okay. Keeping this idea of breakfast as a theme here. And we'll move on to our third shift, which is something that I'm showing on the screen here about breakfast in bed. And really, for a moment, I just want to hear from the group. What are you seeing? What are you thinking? What are you wondering when you're looking at this? What are some things that, when you're looking at this rubric, that comes to mind or makes you think about or makes you wonder about? What do you see? Besides that, I would challenge any of you to give this to a significant other the next time they try to give you breakfast in bed. And you could be like, I've got a rubric. I have a rubric on how this has to be done. What's a thought or two?
So where is this supposed to be taking places? The way it reads, is it a hotel? Is it a bed and breakfast? Where is it from?
Interesting. So you have a little need for additional information about the location where this happens. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering about what the breakfast is going to be because it doesn't actually list the criteria for that.
Gotcha. So we're noticing what's not there. We don't see something about place or importance about that, or the type of food or the food itself. Gotcha.
It's making an assumption that this person is okay with eating as soon as they get up and doesn't need to hold off a while.
Gotcha. Okay. So what we're seeing and experiencing and talking about is something called a single point rubric. And there's some powers in a single point rubric, as far as that you'll notice that you have a middle column with all this criteria, right? And you have a left and a right side. The areas that need work on the left in this particular example. Evidence of exceeding standards is located on the right. What also do you not see in this particular rubric? What's something that you might see in other rubrics, but you don't in this one?
A point scale.
A point scale. Thank you. Right. And there might be some intentionality behind that or a reason. Well, all right. So talking about the why and talking about with single point rubrics, it's the idea of what might it achieve and who might use them and how they might be used might be different than the rubrics that any and all of us have experienced, made, or done. So just for a quick flash, as far as, based on what you're seeing on the single point rubric, what are some thoughts about how a rubric, okay, like that one, can be helpful? You can make teacher level, student level. What are some thoughts?
Because then you're concentrating more on the action or what it is you're supposed to be doing, as opposed to how many points am I going to get, or I need to exclude this in order to do this to get X number of points.
I love that. Thank you, Sharon. And you're right. If you construct it in such a way that there's not a point scaler system or gosh forbid an ABC, right? It is a great opportunity for you to just concentrate on the This is the big F word. What's this help you achieve? Feedback, right? So you can really concentrate on how did it, how did you go above and beyond in this particular example, at least? And more importantly, if I want to get better, if I want to get to meeting the criteria, what are the aspects? Because it could be as specific as, well, the food was served on a tray that was dirty. Okay, well, that's a good need to know as far as the next time I do the breakfast in bed, getting a clean tray would help, right? So we love that. It's like really concentrating on the fact of uncoupling a rubric, in this particular example, a single point rubric, from grading. Okay, so you might say to yourself, well, especially when we're talking about aspects of durable skills, here's an example of one that is not just about a creative contributor, but a very focused part of the creative contributor, right? And in this particular example, it's the creates approaches that are novel, useful, and valued by the world around them. And if you read, that's, maybe about the second half of, in this particular example, a portrait of a learner aspect, right? You're just concentrating on the back half. There's a couple of things that I really want to make explicit here as far as a moment. One is a lot of people who are using durable skills, especially when they first begin that journey, whether it's part of a profile of a graduate or not, they're trying to find ways to give feedback or quote unquote measure how the student is doing. But the aspect and the issue sometimes at hand is, it feels big, it feels heavy, it feels weighty. You feel like you need to make a 4-point scale. But a single point rubric can give a lot of the dimensions of that feedback and quote unquote measuring it by making it explicit, making it simple, right? And breaking it down. Perhaps on the creative contributor, I really want to assess or use a single point rubric on just this little part of it, because that fits better with what we're doing today or this week. Now, I also need to say that, again, true power in this is that, yes, there's the teacher assessing, but then there's the student self-reflecting using a single point rubric. In nice language, it doesn't feel heavy, doesn't feel evaluative. It certainly doesn't have points. In this particular approach, you're not worried about the student getting hung up on, I'm going to give myself a C. You're giving them on the aspect of, well, based on what you did today, how can it get better? You got some grows. You can see this is a little variant of the one we just saw a second ago. And glows. How did I meet or exceed that criteria with evidence? How can students say why? In just a simple way, well, how was my approach at least one of these three things? How is it novel or useful or valued by the world? Tell me why, give me evidence. There's some templates here of a couple of those single point rubrics in the lower left as far as a hyperlink. So on the slide itself, you can click on that to access that as a starting point. But again, we were even talking and kind of joking about this earlier when we were constructing this. You can see how easy and simple it is. It's not like this is a horribly complicated template for you to figure out or use or pop out or create one. But nevertheless, we want to make sure to give you some templates and some takeaways there for that. All right. So one of the things that we want to say as we're wrapping up these 3 shifts that we've given you is that remember that all these simple shifts can also apply to academic standards, and it's not an either or. It could be simultaneously, that these are shifts that just help instruction, although we've been very deliberate as far as when we're presenting and talking today to try to really highlight how these are durable skills that you can use to help measure, improve, or meet. But you can also use some of those exact same shifts to help with the academic standards, and it could be both, that it can help with both of those things. So with that, I am passing a baton to my friend Rachel for the next slide. So I'm going to stop sharing here.
So yes, passing the baton back to me, and hopefully I don't have a coughing fit on you, but I've already made a backup plan should that happen. So we've just talked to you a whole lot about some strategies that maybe you're already using or have seen teachers use, but maybe we've used them, with specifically that academic content lens, kind of not thinking maybe intentionally about how we can use them simultaneously to also explicitly teach those competencies and skills that we said are so important on our graduate profile or our learner profiles. So we want to stop talking for a moment and let you all kind of digest these strategies. So if you will go back to the Jamboard, can someone drop that in the chat for me? Lacey, Adam, whoever. Yep, we're going to go back to our Jamboard. And we're going to play around with these shifts that we've just looked at. So in just a moment, we'll have that there. And if you'll join me back on that same Jamboard before. We got it there, Lacey? Adam?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
She dropped
You
in.
should have a bunch of friends in there.
Woohoo!
All kinds of animals, bats, and gophers,
Yes.
and octopi.
Oh, look at that. We got a bat, a gopher. What is that one? I always a Dumbo octopus. My son's really into sharks right now, so I know all kinds of specific types of sharks. So we can chat about that later. All right. So what you're gonna see on here is, remember, we've been talking about these strategies, right? But we want to anchor those again in those competencies, and we really tried to focus in on communicator, collaborator, and empowered learner. And you guys have already had some beautiful conversations on how it's really hard to like kind of parse apart the effective communicator versus the collaborator, that those skills are so tightly intertwined that sometimes it's hard to parse those. And someone brought up that by looking at the descriptors, what you see on my screen right now. Am I sharing my screen right now? Yes. Gosh, it's the end of the day. Thank y'all for bearing with us till 5:30. You'll see the descriptors, right? And as Lacey mentioned earlier, we'd kind of gone through many iterations of this presentation. And what we really found was powerful was really looking at those descriptors of what makes an effective communicator versus a collaborator. Like, what's the nuances there? So what I want you to do is think about these 3 strategies we've shared with you. So slide 4 has levels of questioning. Slide 5 has uptaking, and slide 6 has single point rubric. And what I would like for you to think about is as again, we're trying to empower our students with these durable skills through explicitly teaching them. So as you're thinking about those 3 strategies, what's a connection you're making to a durable skill? So as you're thinking about something like levels of questioning, which of those durable skills could you maybe explicitly connect that to, and how might you do that? So if you were thinking, levels of questioning might be a great way to empower learners, tell me that and then describe how you might do that. Let's take about like 10 minutes. Lacey, Adam, is that what you guys were thinking here? More or less?
Let's take 6 or 7.
6. So about 6 or 7, about 2 minutes per skill. And think about which durable skill or competency you might attach to that strategy and how you might do that to explicitly teach that, that skill to our students. And remember, it's all about the beauty of those descriptions. Really, just like we would never teach a whole academic standard in one strategy, we wouldn't teach a whole competency with one strategy necessarily. So zoom in on what specific piece of that might you be able to teach using that strategy. What questions have I created?
There are none in the chat.
All right. Well, you guys just take some time and start digging in, thinking about how you might use or how you're already using, but can maybe adapt some of those strategies to more explicitly teach these skills that we know we want our learners to have.
Can you give one example?
Yes, ma'am. Adam, do you want to talk through how we might use like levels of questioning? We had some really good conversations around that earlier.
Absolutely.
Thank
All right.
you.
So you're welcome. Again, and can you click back to the 3 descriptors? Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So you're on a winning path, I think, with this opportunity to reflect and having students do the same thing in whatever process that might look like during or after an activity by picking some of this language and the words connecting. So, for example, if I was using levels of questioning, you might argue, for example, that it is a way of speaking and writing clearly. It is a clear way of communicating under effective communicator, an aspect of questions that you're trying to articulate in order to improve upon conversation between students. So that's taking that little phrase and that little word, but it's a very explicit targeting that aspect of effective communicator. There's probably some other ones that will be bigger buckets or bigger or more obvious, and you can take it from there, but that's an example.
So how that might look on the Jamboard then, I would go to like levels of questioning then. I would make a sticky note. I would say something like, this could be used for communicator. I might, and this is how I might use it in order to explicitly teach that. Did that provide some clarification? So you're adding the sticky notes to the strategy slides themselves, and just kind of brain dumping how you think you could use that connected to a competency or a skill.
I just have to gush a little bit. I have to say, I'm so excited seeing these Post-its. You're capturing the language of these descriptors. I'm seeing phrases that are pulled right out of these descriptors in your justification and explanation of the why and connections. I love that. I think maybe a couple more minutes, if that. Lacey, be our timekeeper.
You have 3 more minutes. You have 3 more minutes.
I love it.
Ding, 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 ding.
All
Your
right.
time is completed.
So if you're like, you guys had the luxury of being able to move around. So I'm just seeing some of these ideas for the first time. So what I'd like you to do, right, is the beauty of a Jamboard is that it allows us to learn from each other's ideas, kind of makes people's thinking visible. So I'd like to give you just a moment, let's say maybe like 1-2 minutes, to look through the 3 Jamboards, the levels of questioning, the uptake, and the single point rubric, and just see how other people were thinking about using those. And if you see one that's maybe speaking to you, where you're like, oh, I like that one, maybe draw a little heart or check it or something to show like you're kind of vibing off that idea there. So take just a couple minutes, look through people's ideas. And then if I see one has some hearts or questions or check marks next to it, I might ask that person to share a little bit of their thinking. So just kind of annotate the ones you might want to know a little more about.
Rachel, might you demonstrate how you might leave a heart?
I'm sorry. I have a terrible habit of assuming. So you could use the pen. Let's say you were really interested in the one that says empowered learner, ask Lego questions. I love that. Never heard of that. So I might draw like a little heart or a question mark, something like that. It does obviously not have to be beautiful, because what I just did was not beautiful. Whatever, just some kind of annotation to show that you're interested in that one, so we know which ones you might want to ask further about. Okay. If you guys will just kind of finish up where you're annotating it. And I'll go through each one of these quickly, and just if somebody wants to share what they were talking about or thinking about, that would be awesome. I see on levels of questioning, we went back and forth on this one a lot, thinking about, is it a does this strategy empower a communicator, a collaborator? And actually the one that got a lot of interest is empowered learner. Anybody want to share what they were thinking, how they might use levels of question to create or to explicitly teach the skills of an empowered learner? Could be in the chat too.
I'm monitoring the chat.
All right. We're also drawing to the end of our time here. So, what about uptaking? Anybody, the one over here, effective communicator, focus on active listening of this shift. Anybody want to share what they were thinking there? Tell us a little more about how you think you could use uptaking for effective communicator.
So I wrote that, and I was just thinking about how not only like in academics, but in life, how important it is to be an effective communicator. And one of those, one of the ways you can show that you're an effective communicator is by actively listening to who's speaking. So I feel like that's a very important shift that even I could make to help my students with that life skill.
Yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that repeating piece, that kind of paraphrasing, it's like you could really zoom in on that to show that active listening, right? I love that. And then lastly, we had our single point rubric. There was a beautiful like heart and brain drawn around, I think the one over here on the left, but someone has gone back and erased their beautiful drawings. Someone had said that they think the single point rubric could be great for empowered learner, helping with feedback and persisting through difficulties. Who wrote that sticky note? Would you mind to share a little bit of your thinking about how you might use that single point rubric? Well, we are drawing to the close here. People are ready to just wrap up, I think. But I think through this activity, you guys saw there's lots of different ways. The strategy, we can't pigeonhole a strategy, right? It's about how we can use these strategies explicitly to teach those competencies. So as we wrap up, and we're thinking about how are we going to explicitly teach these skills that we all think are so important. We just kind of want to know, like, what's next? What's your next step? And if you're an instructional leader and scaling this out to people, if you're a teacher, what might you try tomorrow? Just share with us your kind of closing thoughts on this last Jamboard. What's your next step in this process? And we also left kind of our 4 kind of things to be thinking about with being intentional with your durable skills up here in the left-hand corner for you to kind of think about those as you're thinking about what next might be. So final activity here, just kind of share with us what you think you might do next. What's your next step for whatever your role might be?
On a Post-it note, right? So do a Post-it.
On a Post-it note, yes.
Okay.
There we go. You could, try to add a pin and like write it out. That might be painful. Or you could add a text box, whatever. Or you could just come off mute and tell us if that's whatever, dealer's choice.
That's right.
And this is our optimistic closure, correct, Rachel?
Yes, we're thinking about what have we learned, where are we going, what do we want to do, kind of setting some priorities, reflecting on where we've been and how we're going to use that moving forward.
Well, since I can't get into Jamboard and it keeps telling me that something about, sorry, I can't get into the file, I'll just say that I liked, even though I do have littles, I like the poster idea with the levels of questions. And I think I might add pictures to that because I do have littles that struggle with reading, but I could put things like they can look at the who, what, why, where, when questions. They understand that. And I could put other things on there and give them some examples and maybe help them to figure out better ways of asking questions. Because mine are generally like to ask questions, or they generally like to participate, but they don't always quite get there. So I think that could be helpful for them.
Thank you, Sharon, so much for sharing that. I mean, so often I think we limit what our littles can do. And you're so right. Just showing that example of what those levels of questions can look like, even at that, even for what level are you, Sharon? Kindergarten 1?
Well, I'm 2nd.
Okay. Yeah.
But and they're thinking they can think a lot higher, but they don't always know how to put it into
words.
Phrases. Yeah. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And I would also add that anything that could help where the fact is they're asking great questions, but when you can create a system, a scaffold, a poster that you can point to and say, man, these are great questions, but let's, instead of just saying go deeper, which is ambiguous sounding and maybe a little vague, you could say, these are great level 2 questions. Can someone throw out a level 3? Again, that's the power once people get used to that strategy and structure. So yeah, that's a thought for all grade levels.
Mm-hmm. I see a lot of people reflecting on being explicit, just like Lacey said earlier. That McKenna lesson was awesome, right? Like people who go through that, they love it. But even within that lesson, we could work on being more explicit in the competencies we are teaching, in the skills that those moves are allowing kids to develop, and why we're doing that. So yeah, the explicit nature and figuring out, someone said more natural places to come up with this. So as you're thinking about what's next, and we wrap up here today, we wanted to give you access in the the slides. You have access to all the shifts we've gone through in this whole series. So everything we've done before today, all the ones we talked about today are embedded here in our slide deck. Next meeting will be on March 22nd, again, 4 to 6 virtually. And then we're going to wrap up with an in-person day at the end. So that's just what's ahead of us. There is a sign in here where if you'll sign in, I'll send you out your PD credit, your ELA credit if you need or want that. So if you can sign in, and someone will also maybe drop that in the chat for me so that if you just would like to click on it, you can too. I'll send that out first thing tomorrow. And then, I'll stay there for a second. I just wanted to say, as we wrap up, thank you guys so much for hanging with us this afternoon. We know there's lots of places and lots of things you could have been doing, and we really appreciate your time. As you're thinking about next steps, if there's anything we can do to support your work, any resources you'd like from us, if you need a thought partner, if you're thinking about professional learning for the rest of the year or coming into next year, let us know. We're here to be what you need and do what you need. Thank you guys so much.